I'm Brett Baer. Breaking tonight, a global game of chicken with much of the world's energy needs at stake. President Trump has instituted a naval blockade of all Iranian ports after the collapse of peace talks in Islamabad, Pakistan. We will have an exclusive conversation with Vice President J.D. Vance, who led the American diplomatic team, in just a few moments. But first, here are some other headlines tonight. California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell is resigning from Congress. This comes hours after the House Ethics Committee launched an investigation into sexual misconduct claims against him. Those accusations led Swalwell to abandon his bid to be California governor. We'll have a full report shortly. Pope Leo is pushing back against President Trump over comments made Sunday. U.S. leader saying he does not think the Pope is doing a very good job and called the Pope a liberal catering to the radical left. The Pope told reporters today the Vatican's appeals for peace and reconciliation are rooted in the gospel and that he does not fear the Trump administration. This afternoon, President Trump said he would not apologize for his post or for another post of an AI picture many took to be a depiction of President Trump as Jesus. Stocks climbed amid cautious optimism about the global economy. The Dow surged 302. The S&P 500 finished ahead 69. The Nasdaq jumped 281. We are about 8 hours into the U.S. blockade of the Iranian ports. President Trump is trying to force Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz completely and to agree to U.S. conditions for a permanent ceasefire. We begin tonight with senior national correspondent Rich Edson, live on the North Lawn of the White House. Good evening, Rich.
Hi, good evening, Brett. President Trump says the United States now controls access to Iran's ports through the Strait of Hormuz. And after failed negotiations this weekend, the president says the Iranians are looking to talk again.
We've been called this morning by the right people, the appropriate people, and they want to work a deal.
President Trump claimed this latest Iranian outreach just a few hours after the United States followed through on its threat to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. This morning, the president wrote, quote, "Warning, if any of these ships come anywhere close to our blockade, they will be immediately eliminated, using the same system of kill that we use against the drug dealers on boats at sea. It is quick and brutal." In response, Iran has threatened all ports of American allies in the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. For the past 6 weeks, Iran has largely halted international traffic through the strait, granting exceptions to countries considered allies and who have paid a significant toll. The president says it's now time for the U.S. to block Iranian trade.
We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
Tracking data show 5 vessels crossed the strait today, likely before the blockade began. 2 reversed course near the strait shortly after the start. The president says tankers are headed to the U.S. to load up with oil, and more than 120 empty tankers appear to be sailing here.
We've seen more U.S. exports of energy product go to Asia in particular. We can't take this too far, because the whole point of our energy independence is that we have enough supplies, and you don't want to divert.
Well, then you should have made your deal, buddy.
The president says the U.S. military will work with allies to block traffic in the strait, though he says the U.S. really has no need for the help. The U.K. says it's not supporting the blockade. French President Emmanuel Macron posted about a strictly defensive mission, saying, quote, "In the coming days, together with the United Kingdom, we will organize a conference with those countries prepared to contribute alongside us to a peaceful multinational mission aimed at restoring freedom of navigation in the strait." Senior Pakistani government officials says Pakistan and other countries are pushing the United States and Iran back to the negotiating table, and that they are optimistic about the prospect of renewed discussions. Brett?
Rich Edson, live on the North Lawn. Rich, thanks.
The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
Okay, we're having some technical difficulties right there. We're joined by Vice President J.D. Vance in just a moment, talking about both the negotiations over Iran in Islamabad over the weekend, as well as the vote in Hungary for Viktor Orban that the vice president campaigned on, and talking about the controversy over the president and his comments about the Pope. While we wait for that and work out, let's listen in to the Vice President of the United States.
The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could, and they have chosen not to accept our terms.
Let's talk about the Iran negotiations and maybe what went wrong in Islamabad. Joining us now, Vice President J.D. Vance. Mr. Vice President, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
What happened, and where do we go from here?
Well, first of all, Brett, I wouldn't just say that things went wrong. I also think things went right. We made a lot of progress, but we also made very clear, and I think this is part of the progress we made, what the terms where the United States could make some accommodation, what terms we were flexible on, and what things we absolutely needed to see in order for the President of the United States to feel like he was getting a good deal. And so we laid those things out. We had some good conversations. I think it was the first time that you'd ever seen the Iranian government, the U.S. government meet at such a high level, maybe in the history of the current leadership of Iran. So that's, I think, a positive. And again, we did make some progress in the negotiation. The big question from here on out is whether the Iranians will have enough flexibility, whether the Iranians will accept the critical things that we need to see in order for things to get done.
Well, what are the red lines, like, for Iran, and what didn't they accept? Why are we at the place we're at now?
Yeah, so back out just a little bit, Brett. What the President of the United States has said is, number one, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So all of our red lines flow from that fundamental premise, because it is one thing for the Iranians to say that they themselves are never going to have a nuclear weapon. They are willing to say that, and that's good. But you have to, of course, verify these things. And there are two things in particular where the President of the United States really said we have no flexibility. We have to get to the outcome that the President said. On the first of those things, what some people call the dust, which is the enriched uranium that the Iranians currently possess, we have said that we want that to come out of their country, and we would like to take possession of it. Now, why does that matter? That doesn't matter, of course, because they have access to that material now. That material was actually buried underground by Operation Midnight Hammer. But if you think about this over the long haul, the president doesn't want to leave the next president or the president after that to be worrying about this program. And so we would like to get that material out of the country completely so that the United States has control of it. That's number one. And the second thing is that, again, to this point about verification, it's one thing for the Iranians to say that they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. It's another thing for us to put in place the mechanism to ensure that's not going to happen. Part of that is, of course, to ensure that they don't have the ability to enrich uranium, which is how they got so close to a nuclear weapon before. So those are really the two things where, frankly, the Iranians, I think, did make some progress. They moved in our direction, which is why I think we would say that we had some good signs, but they didn't move far enough. And so what we decided is, you know what, given that we don't think this current team and this current timeline is going to be able to make a deal, let them go back to Tehran. We're going to go back to Washington, and that's where we are today.
So is there a next step? Are there more talks coming? Do they happen in Pakistan, and are you leading them?
Well, it's an interesting question, Brett. I think fundamentally it's a question that would be best put to the Iranians, because the ball really is in their court. We've made clear where we're willing, again, to be accommodating, and we've made clear where we absolutely need to see the nuclear material come out of the country of Iran. Now, what's interesting, Brett, about this is that in the process of doing this negotiation, I do think that we acquired some knowledge about how the Iranians are negotiating, and this is ultimately why we left Pakistan, because what we figured out is that they were unable, I think the team that was there was unable to cut a deal, and they had to go back to Tehran, either from the supreme leader or somebody else, and actually get approval to the terms that we had set. So again, whether we have further conversations, whether we ultimately get to a deal, I really think the ball is in the Iranian court, because we put a lot on the table. We actually made very clear what our red lines were. We also made clear, Brett, that we actually would be very happy. The President of the United States has said he would be very happy if Iran was treated like a normal country, if it had a normal economy, if its people were able to prosper and thrive. But in order for Iran to be a normal country economically, it's going to have to be a normal country from the perspective of not pursuing a nuclear weapon, and it's going to have to be a normal country from not pursuing terrorism. And so there really is, I think, a grand deal to be had here, but it's up to the Iranians, I think, to take the next step.
I hear you talking about the enriched uranium and the nuclear weapon and the inability for them to have one in the long term. I don't hear you mentioning fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, toll-free. Is that one of the red lines?
Well, it's one of the things we talked about, Brett, is that we need to see the Straits of Hormuz fully open. And this is frankly one of the things where the Iranians tried to move the goalposts during the negotiation. We made very clear that that's unacceptable. We came to the negotiation saying the United States, what we've given here is a ceasefire. We've stopped bombing the country. What we expect the Iranians to give up is a full reopening of the Straits of Hormuz. We have seen, as the president has said, some significant uptick in traffic coming through the Straits of Hormuz. That's good for the global economy. It's good for the United States of America as well. But we haven't seen that full reopening. So our expectation is that the Iranians are going to continue to make progress to opening the Straits of Hormuz. And if they don't, it's going to fundamentally change the negotiation that we have with them.
You're not surprised. I mean, the Iranians often talk about negotiations and in a different way. The Iranian foreign minister posted in intensive talks at highest level in 47 years. Iran engaged with the U.S. in good faith to end war, but when just inches away from Islamabad MOU, we encountered maximalism, shifting goalposts, and blockade. Zero lessons earned. Goodwill begets goodwill. Enmity begets enmity. That does not sound like they're heading back to the table anytime soon. Does this ceasefire continue and then the war starts again?
Well, first of all, Brett, I have to give a lot of credit to Field Marshal Munir and the Prime Minister of Pakistan, both who are incredible hosts and I think incredible statesmen, and helping, mediate the conversation between us and the Iranians, again, two countries that have not really had serious discussions in a very long time. But to your point about Foreign Minister Araghchi's statement, if you see what Foreign Minister Araghchi said, yes, there's a little bit of bluster, but if you read between the lines, he himself is saying that we were just inches away from an agreement. And I think that what that suggests is the Iranians, one, they're very interested in making a deal. Two, they did move pretty close to our position over the stage of the negotiations. But one thing I'll say, Brett, is Iranians are very different negotiators. At least those Iranians were very different negotiators than we are in the United States. What I did and what Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff did is that we made very clear, look, these are the things that we're willing to give, but these are the things that we must have. We must have the enriched material out of Iran. We must have their conclusive commitment to not develop a nuclear weapon. And I think that if the Iranians are willing to meet us there, then this can be a very, very good deal for both countries. If they're not willing to meet us there, that's up to them. That's their decision. And really the ball is very much in their court. So you ask what happens next. I think the Iranians are going to determine what happens next as the President of the United States says, we have the cards. We have the military advantage. We now have additional economic pressure that we're applying on them through the blockade that we've imposed on their oil coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. So we have a lot of cards. We have the leverage, and we're going to see what the Iranians do with that.
And so that's how the blockade works. U.S. naval ships stop Iranian-flagged vessels going to the through the Strait of Hormuz?
Not just Iranian flagged vessels, Brett, but any vessel that we know is going to Iranian ports or has come from Iranian ports. You're probably going to see some vessels try to reflag themselves, but of course we're going to know, because we have very good intelligence, which ships are going in and which ships are coming out that are connected to Iran. But Brett, here's the very interesting thing about all this is that the only thing the Iranians have been able to do, they haven't, of course, beaten us militarily. They've had their military been decimated. They haven't been able to prosecute the case when it comes to weapons of war. What they have done is engage in this act of economic terrorism against the entire world. They basically threatened any ship that's moving through the Straits of Hormuz. Well, as the President of the United States showed, two can play at that game. And if the Iranians are going to try to engage in economic terrorism, we're going to abide by a simple principle that no Iranian ships are getting out either. We know that's a big deal to them. We know that applies additional economic leverage. And again, Brett, the president wants the Iranian people to thrive and succeed. He has had his negotiation team put on the table a serious proposal. The ball is in Iran's court. Did we make progress? Yes. But we're going to find out from the Iranians whether we can make that ultimate bit of progress that gets us to a big deal.
The president's also said he wants this to end soon as it can. It's being reported that you had real skepticism about this at the beginning, and that you expressed that to the president. Is that true?
Well, Brett, you know, I give my advice to the President of the United States, and we all do, and I expect that when I give advice to the President of the United States, that it's going to be private, because the president should rely on his senior advisors without them then running to the media. What I will say, Brett, is that I 100% agree with the president on the fact that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. I've seen that just in the negotiation that we've had over the last couple of days, that these are tough negotiators, but they're fundamentally the kinds of people where them having a nuclear weapon would impose terrible costs on the entire world. If they're willing to engage in economic terrorism on the entire world, what would it mean? What leverage would they have if they had a nuclear bomb in Tehran? That's not an outcome that is acceptable to us, or really should be acceptable to anybody. So I 100% support the president's goals here to keep nuclear weapons, to keep the worst weapons of war out of the hands of the Iranians.
A few more things, Mr. Vice President. You say there's progress being made here, and the trip to Pakistan was not fruitless. However, I'm not hearing the next step if the Iranians don't do the next step. You also campaigned for Viktor Orban in Hungary, and he lost that race, defeated after 16 years in power. Your thoughts about whether it was worth it to go support Viktor Orban in that race, considering he lost significantly, and he's one of the only European leaders who supports Vladimir Putin?
Well, first of all, Brett, I think that Viktor Orban's a great guy who's done a very good job. I think that his legacy in Hungary is transformational. 16 years fundamentally changing that country. But one of the reasons why we decided to do that, Brett, is not because, you know, we can't read polls. We certainly knew there was a very good chance that Viktor would lose that election. We did it because he's one of the few European leaders we've seen who's been willing to stand up to the bureaucracy in Brussels that has been very, very bad for the United States. So, for example, when you see a European bureaucrat go after an American company, sometimes the only vote no, the only vote to protect that American interest has been Viktor Orban. We didn't go because we expected Viktor to cruise to an election victory. We went because it was the right thing to do, to stand behind a person who had stood by us for a very long time. So this wasn't about Russia, and fundamentally it wasn't about Europe. It was about the United States and the fact that he's been a good partner to both me and the president personally, but also to the United States. I'm sad that he lost. We'll work very well, I'm sure, with the next prime minister of Hungary. But it wasn't a bad trip at all, because it's worth standing by people, even if you don't win every race.
Mr. Vice President, stand by if you would. Special report continues with the Vice President of the United States after this. Welcome back to Special Report. Joining us again, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. Pope Leo has expressed problems with the war in Iran, says that we should be peacemakers, been very vocal. The president took to Truth Social saying Leo should be thankful because, as everyone knows, he was a shocking surprise. He wasn't on any list to be Pope. Was only put there because the church, because he was an American, they thought he would be good, best way to deal with President Donald J. Trump. If I wasn't in the White House, Leo wouldn't be in the Vatican. Just wondering, as a Catholic, how you consider this Truth Social post, and then the post of the picture, which a lot of people took as the president posting a picture of himself as Jesus. He later said that he posted it as thinking as a doctor saving people.
I thought it was me as a doctor, and it had to do with Red Cross, as a Red Cross worker there, which we support, and only the fake news could come up with that one.
But it really caused a kerfuffle, Mr. Vice President. I'm just wondering what you make of all of this, and whether it's what you think of this back and forth with the church.
Well, first of all, Brett, I think the president was posting a joke, and of course he took it down because he recognized that a lot of people weren't understanding his humor in that case. I think the President of the United States likes to mix it up on social media, and I actually think that's one of the good things about this president is that he's not filtered. He doesn't send everything through a communications professional. He actually reaches out directly to the people. You know, when it comes to the disagreements with the Vatican, look, we're going to have disagreements, Brett, from time to time. I think it's a good thing, actually, that the Pope is advocating for the things that he cares about. But we're always going to have disagreements on matters of public policy, or I should say, sometimes we're going to have disagreements on matters of public policy. The Pope has been critical of our immigration policy, but ultimately the immigration policy of the United States is set by Donald Trump. The Pope is going to have disagreements on other issues. We can respect the Pope. We certainly have a good relationship with the Vatican, but we're also going to disagree on substantive questions from time to time. I think that's a totally reasonable thing. It isn't particularly newsworthy.
Do you think that when the president says it's hurting him very badly, catering to the radical left, it's hurting the Catholic Church? Do you agree with the president there?
Well, look, I think the president has the prerogative to set American foreign policy. He's got the prerogative to set American immigration policy. He has to look out for the interests of the United States of America. And that inevitably means that when the Vatican comments on issues of public policy, sometimes there's going to be agreement, of course, and sometimes there's going to be disagreement. I think that's a reasonable thing, Brett. I don't think that it's particularly newsworthy, but I certainly think that in some cases it would be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality, to stick to matters of what's going on in the Catholic Church, and let the President of the United States stick to dictating American public policy. But when they're in conflict, they're in conflict. I don't worry about it too much, Brett. I think it's a natural thing. I'm sure it'll happen in the future, and it's not that big of a deal that it happened in the past.
Last thing, should the American people be ready for more increased prices, especially at the gas tank, considering that this does not look like it's going to resolve very quickly as far as the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, the president said, Brett, that yes, gas prices are higher. Yes, energy prices are higher. First of all, they're higher from a baseline where we've never had the terrible energy prices that we had of the last administration. So we come at this from a position of strength. But Brett, absolutely, we know the American people are hurting. That's why that we're negotiating so aggressively to try to get the energy prices to come down. We're going to keep on working at it. I do think that we're in a place where we've accomplished our objectives. We can start to wind this thing down. I'd much rather wind this thing down with a big successful negotiation. But regardless, the president said this is not going to go on forever. That's never his intention. And I think because of that, the energy prices, while painful, are not going to be around forever.
Mr. Vice President, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Brett. Take care.
Up next, Congressman Eric Swalwell calls sexual misconduct allegations leveled against him false, but now plans to resign from Congress, suspend his gubernatorial campaign. We'll have a live report. Plus, Fox News gets first access to a new raid on the home of the suspect who allegedly targeted the residence of one of the top artificial intelligence executives in the world. We'll take you there. Breaking tonight, as we told you at the top of the program, California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell is resigning from Congress. This comes hours after the House Ethics Committee launched an investigation into sexual misconduct claims against him. The allegations forced Swalwell to abandon his bid for governor in California. Correspondent Max Gordon is in Los Angeles tonight with the latest. Good evening, Max.
Brett, good evening. After pulling out of the race for California governor, Eric Swalwell now says he will resign from Congress. In his statement, he says in part, "I am deeply sorry to my family, staff, and constituents for mistakes in judgment I've made in my past. I will fight the serious false allegations made against me. However, I must take responsibility and ownership for the mistakes I did make." The decision comes after a bombshell report ran Friday in the San Francisco Chronicle detailing the story of an anonymous ex-staffer who claimed Swalwell sexually assaulted her while she was too intoxicated to give consent. Since that initial Chronicle report, 3 additional women also spoke to CNN with sexual misconduct allegations, including accusations that the congressman sent explicit text messages and nude photos. In the wake of these stories, Republican Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna said that she would be filing a motion to expel him, and there had been growing support for the move. The House Ethics Committee also launched its own investigation. Meanwhile, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office confirmed that they are investigating some of the allegations that reportedly took place in New York. urging any other victims to come forward. And it does appear that there are other victims. Tomorrow, here in Southern California, another accuser and her lawyers will be holding a press conference to describe her claims and her next legal steps. Brett?
All right, Max, thanks. We'll follow it. Also breaking tonight, Fox News gets first access to an FBI raid on the home of a suspect in the attack on the residence of OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. The motive is apparently linked to Altman's work with artificial intelligence. Correspondent Brooke Taylor reports this evening from Spring, Texas.
Fox News was the first on the ground as FBI agents raided the home of a 20-year-old suspect accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail at OpenAI CEO Sam Altman's house in San Francisco. Federal agents seen going through file cabinets in the garage and taking pictures of evidence. The suspect, identified as Daniel Marino Gamma. Investigators say he traveled from his home in Spring, Texas to San Francisco, allegedly plotting to kill Altman. New surveillance images show him throwing the Molotov cocktail outside Altman's house, setting a gate on fire. No one was hurt. The suspect then made his way to the company's headquarters, where he hurled a chair at the glass doors. Police say he was holding a jug of kerosene and threatened to burn the building and kill anyone inside. San Francisco police arrested him shortly after. According to the criminal complaint, he was carrying a lengthy document he wrote, which, quote, listed the names and addresses of apparent board members and chief executive officers of AI companies and investors. The DOJ filed federal charges against Marina Gamma today for attempted damage and destruction of property by means of explosives and possession of an unregistered firearm. He's already charged with multiple state felonies, including attempted murder. Altman responded to the attack in a blog post, sharing a picture of his family, saying, quote, "Normally we try to be pretty private, but in this case, I'm sharing a photo in the hopes that it might dissuade the next person from throwing a Molotov cocktail at her house, no matter what they think about me." And police say just 2 days after this, there were reports of a gunshot fired outside of Altman's home in San Francisco. 2 people were arrested, but police say that the 2 cases are not related. Brett.
Brooke Taylor, live in Spring, Texas. Brooke, thanks. A federal judge has dismissed President Trump's defamation lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal. The president contends the journal tarnished his reputation with an article describing a birthday card to deceased sex offender Jeffrey Epstein bearing the Trump signature. The judge says the president did not come close to meeting the actual malice standard that public figures must clear in defamation cases. Fox News and the Wall Street Journal are controlled both by the Murdoch family. Up next, the panel on the situation in the Middle East, my interview with Vice President J.D. Vance. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. WSVN in Miami, as a 16-year-old boy, has been charged as an adult with murder and aggravated sexual abuse in the death of his 18-year-old stepsister on a cruise ship. Timothy Hudson was initially charged as a juvenile in the killing of Anna Kepner. He has been allowed to live in the custody of an uncle. Prosecutors are now challenging that. Fox 5 in New York with the manhunt for a suspect in Saturday's mass shooting at a Union, New Jersey Chick-fil-A. 1 person was killed, 6 others injured. Police say masked suspects stormed the restaurant around 9 p.m. and opened fire.
Jeez.
And this is a live look at Atlanta from Fox 5, our affiliate down there. One of the big stories there tonight, the conclusion of the Masters. Rory McIlroy became just the 4th golfer in history to win consecutive Masters titles after a dramatic final round Sunday at Augusta. The champion pulled ahead with key birdies at Amen Corner, including a bold shot over Rays Creek on the 12th, leading to a birdie. McIlroy finished with 1 under 71 to secure a 1-shot victory. He joined the elite company of Jack Nicklaus, Nick Faldo, and Tiger Woods as the only man to successfully defend a Masters title. Congratulations, Rory. That's tonight's live look. Outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.
I wouldn't just say that things went wrong. I also think things went right. We made a lot of progress, but we also made very clear, and I think this is part of the progress we made, what the terms where the United States could make some accommodation, what terms we were flexible on, and what things we absolutely needed to see. The big question from here on out is whether the Iranians will have enough flexibility, whether the Iranians will accept the critical things that we need to see in order for things to get done.
Vice President J.D. Vance earlier on the show. Let's bring in our panel. Start there. Fox News Chief Political Analyst Britt Hume, Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee Congressman, co-host of The Five, Fox News Political Analyst Guy Benson, and Politico White House Bureau Chief Dasha Burns. Okay, Britt, on Iran, what did you take from the interview with the VP?
Well, the emphasis, I think, on J.D. Vance's part and in explaining the outcome of this on the nuclear emphasizes one key point. Here Iran is badly battered, militarily crushed. They really don't have any cards here, other than the Strait of Hormuz, which we're acting on now. And they come into this negotiation absolutely refusing to give up their nuclear weapon ambitions, which was the bottom line for the president and his negotiators. If that doesn't emphasize that President Trump was correct in assessing in the beginning of this,
absolutely,
that Iran was still going for a nuclear weapon and it was something the world could not afford, then I don't know what could.
Right.
Yeah, Harold, I did not hear the next time they're getting together, whether he thought the Iranians were going to make another pitch. He's hopeful, but it's not definitive.
First, thanks for having me on. I agree largely with Britt, but I was slightly disappointed, not in what we're doing and the success of the blockade and the fact that we need to disarm and ensure that the Iranians don't have access to a nuclear weapon. I didn't hear a strategy, though, from the vice president. I thought it was curious, Britt, when he said he thought that they were inches away from making an agreement, yet he also thought that they had the wrong group in the room, that group had to go back and get approval for those things. Look, I'm hopeful that we must have an agreement. Not hopeful that we get an agreement. We have to have an agreement. He made it clear, though, and I thought the most important thing he said was that no possession of nuclear weapons, that all red lines flow from that. But I was a little disappointed not to hear the strategy going forward. Are we waiting for them? Are they waiting for us? What's the next step? I know the world is awaiting. And the president, who up to this point I think has done a great job. The blockade should get more credit. I hope NATO comes to our support in that effort. But the clear thing, the one thing that will make us victorious here is that we ensure that the Iranians do not have uranium to enrich to affect us or affect our allies in the region.
Dasha, what do you think the hope is at the White House about the blockade, that it changes the dynamic?
I think that's exactly right. I think the White House is trying to take away the leverage that Iran believes it has, the leverage that it has projected onto the world. You know, the challenge, and I think the vice president laid it out a little bit in the interview there, is this threshold for pain that Iran does have. This is existential for them. And he took on an enormously difficult task with these negotiations, because what I'm hearing from sources close to the White House is that the maximum that Iran is willing to give does not meet the minimum that the United States is willing to accept. And the vice president mentioned inches. Well, those can really feel like miles when you are in a room with a state that has everything and that has very little to lose compared to the United States.
Yeah, Guy?
Well, Brett, I think that what we're seeing from the United States now and President Trump and now our military naval blockade of Iranian ports, that will have a devastating impact on Iran's already battered economy and therefore the regime that's already in deep trouble with its people, because in part those economic realities, it also could have a significant pain point or two for other countries, including very much the Chinese, the Pakistanis, the Turkish government as well. General Jack Keane was making this point on my radio show earlier. Those countries might at some point start ramping up the pressure on Iran to say, you better start relenting on some of these major points from the Americans. I think that's part of the hope here, as we've heard at least an indication from the president that the Iranians want to talk again. But it comes back to Britt's initial most important point when you zoom out. With its back against the wall, and its leadership largely decapitated, and it's like next man up, so many of their sites destroyed by our military. This is a regime that remains implacably and fanatically committed to a nuclear weapons program. And I think it only underscores how insane it would be for us to allow that eventuality to occur. And that was the reason, that was the triggering cause to have this operation in the first place. And I think it's important to keep that in mind as we zoom in, to also keep a broader picture of why we're doing this in the first place.
Yeah, we'll see if there's any movement going to another negotiation in Islamabad or elsewhere. Britt, I also asked about this back and forth with Pope Leo, what the Pope said about Iran and the war, what the president posted, and then this picture that got a lot of response all over the internet, even from Trump supporters and significant ones. Ari Fleischer tweeted out about this picture, said it's inappropriate. President Trump's team should never have posted this image. If he saw it first, he should never have approved it. It's inappropriate, embarrassing, it's offensive. The president said he did post it. He had a different definition for it. I asked the vice president about that, and here's part of that answer.
I have no fear about the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe. I hope to know what the church is about too. We're not politicians.
It really caused a kerfuffle, Mr. Vice President. I'm just wondering what you make of all of this.
He took it down because he recognized that a lot of people weren't understanding his humor in that case. I think the President of the United States likes to mix it up on social media. We can respect the Pope. We certainly have a good relationship with the Vatican, but we're also going to disagree on substantive questions from time to time. I think that's a totally reasonable thing. It isn't particularly newsworthy.
Britt.
Well, Brett, I think we can add a couple of codicils to what we know about the rules of politics. One of them is don't pretend to be Jesus, and the other is don't get into an unnecessary fight with the Pope. I think the president may have a point about the Pope, but the way he expressed it, I think, was unfortunate. And the Pope has, a world of admirers, and you don't want to get on the wrong side of those. It's just, it doesn't do you any good, and it may do you harm.
Harold?
Reverend Billy Graham had great relationships with American presidents and helped them find faith and find answers through the gospel. I think the president, was just a bad joke. And the vice president should have just said that as a Catholic. The president has a way of doing these things and saying these things, and we give him a lot of latitude, but this was just a bad and futile attempt at poking fun at something, whatever it was he was trying to poke fun at. And I agree with Britt. Don't get into a fight with the Pope. You're not going to win.
We'll see where this goes from here. We've got more to talk about up next, the Eric Swalwell scandal and what comes out of all of that.
It was a good decision.
Why is that?
You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. It's terrible what has been alleged.
I think I've met Mr. Swalwell once or twice. I want to hear his side of the story.
I believe that he should resign, and I believe that there are other members and Republican members who should resign as well. So it depends on if it's worded in a fair way.
Will you vote to expel Eric Swalwell?
And Congressman Gonzalez, I would let these investigations happen.
Well, some news this afternoon, Congressman Eric Swalwell resigning from his congressional seat. He also already suspended his gubernatorial run in California. We're back with the panel. Dasha, we're getting late word, news that Tony Gonzalez is retiring, he says. He just made a post on that. This all comes as the House Ethics Committee was looking at possibly getting expulsion for both of these folks.
Yeah, this was a question that a lot of folks had. Both Gonzalez and Swalwell stepped down from their races, but did not resign from Congress. Now that they have done this, I think it is a good thing for both parties. I think both parties would have had a hard time sort of looking away from this. And the American people are so disillusioned with Congress right now that to see a bit of accountability, I think is a healthy thing for both parties.
It's a quick fall from grace guy for Eric Swalwell, who said he was going to fight this to the end and wasn't dropping out, and then suddenly it seemed the Democratic Party came out of the woodwork.
That's right. At first, they were sort of coalescing in this place where they were saying he has to move on from his gubernatorial ambitions, but not going as far as saying he needed to resign from Congress. There were then some rumblings in town that more shoes were going to drop on this scandal, and so perhaps he saw the writing on the wall and decided, you know what, I'm just going to get out at this point. And as you mentioned, on the other side of the aisle, Tony Gonzalez, himself immersed in a very sordid scandal, also heading for the exits. Timeline unclear, at least on both of them for now.
Yeah, put up the Tony Gonzalez X post, if you would, saying that he's going to retire. This comes after an affair with a staffer who ended up committing suicide. The Swalwell case, this case, you're looking at situations, Britt, that we follow on Capitol Hill, but in a very tight majority. All of these things are going to be interesting to watch.
I think Gonzalez might have survived a few more weeks if Swalwell hadn't fallen, and you can track this the Swalwell collapse to the Democrats being pretty ruthless when they need to be. When a candidate is in a race they think he or she might lose, they don't hesitate to get rid of him. Witness Biden, witness now Swalwell.
Yeah, I only have 15 seconds, Harold.
I think Senator Peter Welch said it well.
Wow, you gave me 5 seconds. I like that. That's pretty good. Daniel, thanks so much. We got a lot in there. Tomorrow in Special Report, Congress returns with a big to-do list, including Homeland Security funding, war powers, and the Save America Act. We may actually hear directly from the Iranians tomorrow. You'll see that here on Special Report if we do. Remember, if you can't catch us live, set your DVR, 6 p.m. in the East, 3 p.m. on the West Coast. You can follow me on TikTok, X, and Instagram at Brett Baer for exclusive behind-the-scenes content. A different kind of show tonight. Thanks for inviting.
Did you say I have a house baby? Twists and turns of this Iran conflict. The president's decision to block the strait was not predicted by many of the so-called experts.
We can't let a country blackmail or extort the world, because that's what they're doing. They're really blackmailing the world. We're not going to let that happen.
And the U.S. blockade has begun. After peace talks with Iran stalled, President Trump had had enough. He's not taking Kharg Island, at least not yet, but now CENTCOM is unwavering. Any unauthorized ship will be stopped, diverted, and if necessary, captured. Iran is threatening retaliation, warning no port in the region is off limits. Meanwhile, whatever is left of Iran is threatening to do more damage. Watch.
We must have the enriched material out of Iran. We must have their conclusive commitment to not develop a nuclear weapon. And I think that if the Iranians are willing to meet us there, then this can be a very, very good deal for both countries. If they're not willing to meet us there, that's up to them. That's their decision. And really the ball is very much in their court.
Here with his take is Indiana Senator Jim Banks of the Armed Services Committee. Senator, great to see you tonight. The New York Times is reporting that Iran proposed suspending nuclear activity for up to 5 years, but the Trump administration rejected it out of hand, insisting on 20 years. The White House didn't confirm or deny this report, but Caroline Leavitt told us the negotiating team made our red lines clear. To me, even 20 years seems too short. Congressman.
Well, that's right. President Trump has been clear every step of the way. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's what these negotiations are all about. That's what this war is about. Any terms that fall short of that is unsuccessful. And by the way, Laura, President Trump every step of the way has warned the Iranians. He's given them timelines. He's told them exactly what he's going to do. Drop the nuclear program, stop funneling money to terrorist proxy groups, and open the straits, or we're going to bomb the hell out of you. And President Trump has kept his word every step of the way. The Iranians know that, and that's why they're begging to come back to the table to continue these negotiations. I have a sense that we're in the final stages of all of this. Vice President Vance's efforts last week was I thought a good signal, a good sign that these negotiations will move in the right direction as the Iranians realize what stands in front of them next Tuesday when this ceasefire is over. Come to their senses, come back to the table, drop the nuclear program forever.
Most Americans still think we're the good guys in this, Congressman, but some of the media elites seem to be on the fence. Check this out.
The problem is, I really don't want to see Bibi Netanyahu or Donald Trump politically strengthened by this war, because they are two awful human beings. They are terrible, terrible people doing terrible things to America's standing in the world and Israel's standing in the world. And so I really find myself torn. I want to see Iran militarily defeated, but I do not want to see these two terrible people strengthened.
Okay, he's torn darn, Congressman. So dump the mullahs who are take glee in torturing and executing dissidents, or a duly elected president of the United States in his best judgment. That's a hard call for Tom Friedman.
Well, there's nothing more demoralizing, by the way, to our troops who are in the fight, who are fighting in a war to keep America safe and secure, than to watch the Democrats and the media cheer against the commander-in-chief and the very efforts that they're a part of. I mean, it's shameful that they would cheer against our troops in that kind of a way. So shame on the Democrats for that, and the media for joining them.
Senator, do you think the president should at least threaten to not go to this Beijing summit, given these reports of China's support for Iran in this conflict and cargo ships reportedly with Chinese material landing over the weekend in the region?
It's a key. It's a great point, because 80% of Iran's oil goes to China. So the blockade is weakening China as President Trump is seeking a better trade deal with our biggest enemy to put American workers first. So it's a great point, but I think it gives the president even more leverage when he goes to Beijing.
Senator, thank you very much. Great to see you. And coming up, a conservative journalist attacked a violent anti-ICE mob. Coming up. Activists hiding. Independent journalist Savannah Hernandez showed up in Minneapolis to try to find out.
Oh, God. I didn't even come here today to, try and interview people. I came here to simply observe and you don't know.
The TPUSA Frontlines reporter found out that the Stop Hate crowd is the most vicious bunch you could ever come face to face with. And the attack on Hernandez turned into a family affair. Enter the dad, Chris Ostrashoko, known on social media as the Minnesota Angry Man. Hernandez is about 5'4" or so, and this beast with the bulging eyes appeared to violently shove her to the ground. You can't see his eyes for some reason in that, but suffice it to say, his big bulging eyes. Now, she wasn't hurt worse. Yeah, well, she's lucky for that. Now, at that point, she was just trying to get out of there, but the daughter returned to the scene.
Leave it! I'm trying to leave!
The three raving maniacs were arrested, and we're still working to find out the charges, and the FBI has opened up an investigation. Here exclusively to tell her story, Savannah Hernandez, TPUSA Frontlines reporter. Savannah, I was very worried about you when I saw this video. It's very scary. I was standing exactly where you were standing back in January, and these people are crazy. Why did it escalate so quickly?
Well, let's make no mistake, Laura, this escalated because they found out that I work for Turning Point USA. This isn't the first time that I have been confronted and assaulted at this point for journalism on the streets of the United States of America, but since Charlie Kirk's assassination, this is now the third time that people have come up to me after I have not been interviewing, not been engaging, but simply being on the street and filming a protest, figured out I work for Turning Point USA, and have made a point to confront me, to threaten me, to harass me, and now brutally assault me to prove a point. So that's why this escalated, Laura. I wasn't interviewing anybody. I wasn't engaging with anybody. I was, and I apologize. This is the first time I'm talking about this assault, and I'm scared to report, Laura. This is my job. It's what I've been doing for the last 6 years.
Yeah.
And I'm terrified to do my job. I can't even interview people properly on the street because I got brutally assaulted and pushed to the ground by a 250-pound man for simply going and reporting on anti-ICE activities. I made a point not to engage, Laura, because I know the left wing is violent. They assassinated Charlie Kirk last year, and now they're coming for each and every single Turning Point USA employee because they know they can get away with it because the local jurisdictions aren't going to charge them. Now, luckily, the sheriffs are planning on bringing forward charges. I hope. I did tell them I wanted to press charges. This has been elevated to both the DOJ and the DHS. They are opening an investigation as well, but I'm horrified, Laura. I'm horrified.
Well, this is the United States of America. You were just standing there, and I know exactly how you feel because they surrounded me the same exact way, and they start screaming in your ear. And you stuck around there a little longer than I did. I got in my car because I didn't want to deal with this. But this is their MO. They don't want anyone there because they don't want anyone knowing the truth about how many of them are paid, how this is organized, who's funding it, and what they are really all about. They don't want anyone to know. If they were proud of their movement, they'd be like, welcome, we'll be happy to talk to you. But they don't want that.
Absolutely, Laura. And this attack was so horrific that you now have the radical left-wing streamers and left-wing activists coming out and denouncing this attack, saying, oh, we shouldn't touch women. That's probably a bridge too far. But again, I was targeted because I work for Turning Point USA, because I'm a brown woman who thinks the wrong thing, because I am a Christian. They were mocking me for my religion. They were mocking me for my political views. They, like I said, they told me that I had no right to be on a public street, and they made sure to run me out and brutally assault me multiple times as I was trying to leave. So that's the United States of America in 2026. And my main question is, how was this allowed to happen in President Trump's America? So,
well, the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office better do its job here, because if there was a message from on high, this will not be tolerated, then it wouldn't have been tolerated. And the feeling here is that it's okay to do this. And that's the problem. Let's bring in Tom Holman, who is a border czar, who's going to join this conversation. We're going to have him separate segment. But Tom, this is insane. I saw it firsthand when I was in Minneapolis. These people are terrifying to young women. She's 5'4", and she's lucky she wasn't hurt worse.
And look, my heart goes out, and this shouldn't happen in the United States. But what feeds all this? Mayors and governors and members of Congress who want to vilify Republicans. They want to vilify President Trump. They want to vilify Turning Point USA because they have conservative beliefs. I mean, they attack journalists. Well, they also attack sworn law enforcement officers. We're living in a country now where an ICE officer gets attacked daily. These protests, these attacks, not only happen where Sarah was, it also happened in Los Angeles, Portland, Chicago. It's an ongoing dilemma, and that's why I'm grateful the FBI is stepping in. DOJ is going to seek prosecution on this, because at this point, I don't trust any local jury in a sanctuary jurisdiction. I'd much rather see the feds pick it up and charge it with a federal crime, because the sentence is going to be a lot more stringent and it sends a strong message. But we cannot give up on this. We got to keep prosecuting these people. 18 USC 111, interference, assault, record high number of prosecutions. We got to continue down that path and hold these people accountable. We cannot accept this as a norm in the United States of America.
And Savannah, we don't want anyone injured who are at these protests, or at whatever we want to call them, protests, festivals. Sometimes they feel like festivals, depending on what the weather's like. But no one should be hurt for exercising their First Amendment rights. And Savannah, are you satisfied in your view that the FBI will be able to handle this?
I hope they do. Again, the DHS is involved as well, and I hope that, the full force of the federal government is utilized against these people to send a message to all of the radical left-wing who have been targeting journalists for years, attacking us, harassing us, censoring us, and silencing us. I really hope that a message is sent here with this, and it's followed through with.
Savannah, please stay out there doing what you're doing. Tom, when people are screaming in your ear or blowing a whistle in your ear, they do it to ICE agents. When they're not trying to run them over with their vehicles, they're doing it to ICE agents. That in and of itself is an assault. I mean, you lose your hearing or have damaged hearing, but that's part of the routine. And for their part, they say, well, your ICE agents are killing our people. We're just blowing a whistle or shoving someone to the ground.
Well, it's not acceptable. It's interference. It's impeding because it prevents them from doing what they're doing. While they're busy dealing with this protester that turned criminal, bad guys are getting away. So you're exactly right. It is interference. We need to prosecute more of these cases. And I apologize to Savannah. I got her name mixed up. But, she's a patriot. She went out there, a female in that crowd, to report to the American people the truth. But the left doesn't want to hear the truth. But we're going to keep pushing. Laura, if it wasn't for this network, the American people wouldn't hear the truth. But members of Congress, every day, I've been up on the Hill negotiating DHS shutdown. They don't want to reform ICE. They want to shut it down. And they talk about ICE making arrests in schools and churches and hospitals. We've never made an arrest inside of a hospital. We've never made arrests inside of a church. But I watched a TV show last week, some medical show, and they showed ICE agents coming into an emergency and arresting somebody that was getting ready for surgery. The whole left is misinforming the American people, and that's why you see the hate and the rhetoric, because all these people are lying about what the men and women of ICE and Border Patrol do. So thank God we got a network like Fox News is going to put out the truth to the American people. I just wish more networks were honest and talk about the real job that ICE is doing, and most importantly, what they're not doing.
And Tom, meanwhile, we have illegal aliens hammering to death American citizens, bludgeoning them to death, slitting their throats at bus stops, groping them in high school hallways. We're showing that horrible case from Fort Myers, Florida, Haitian illegal. And if it weren't for ICE trying to get these people out, if it weren't for the open border, bringing all these illegals into the country, I mean, we'd have a lot more people alive in our country or not brutalized.
You're exactly right, and that's why I came back the second time out of retirement, because for 4 years I woke up every day pissed off about what the Biden administration did to our border and not letting ICE do their job. And I still wake up angry every day when I see stories like this, because, again, they're shutting down DHS because they don't want ICE to do their job. They're protecting criminal aliens over the men and women who wear that badge and gun, and over the American citizens who are in danger in these sanctuary cities. So it's just, the world's upside down. But look, I worked for the greatest president of my lifetime. We're not giving up. We're pushing forward. We are going to have a mass deportation operation. We'll keep that border secure. We're going to keep doing our job despite the hate, despite the rhetoric. And, God bless the Angel families. Another reason I came back out of retirement, I met hundreds of them. Their stories will never get old. But here's the issue, Laura. We're talking about this one attack in Florida. We'll be talking about something else next week and something else the following week. Every member of Congress, it should be not a partisan issue. Let ICE enforce the immigration law and make this country safer again. Every public safety threat we take off the street makes this country safe. Every illegal alien we take off the street prevents a crime in the future. So let us enforce the law. We're going to do it without apology, and it should be a nonpartisan issue.
You bet. There should be no acceptable collateral damage of Americans dead in the street because they refuse to do their job. Tom, thank you for what you do every day. We appreciate you. What a tough story for Savannah. I'm glad she's out there. And coming up, a street takeover erupts into gunfire. Why can't police stop this? Coming up. This is what passes as their social life these days. But don't worry, officials are insisting it's all under control. In D.C., 4 teens, only 4, arrested after a mob swarmed the popular Navy Yard neighborhood last week. And in L.A. yesterday, 4 were hospitalized after gunfire broke out.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm up.
Here to discuss is Dr. Darren Porcher, former NYPD lieutenant. Darren, thank you for joining us tonight. Police are outnumbered and seem to be overwhelmed in these situations. What can be done?
This is an easy fix from a law enforcement visionary perspective. One of the things that police should do is marry in with the technology. When we look at this video, we see this appears to be young people. So more than likely, this gathering was organized on social media. So you should have a unit within that police department that monitors these social media platforms such as TikTok and Instagram.
Absolutely.
And that's when you would be able to establish that there's a potential meetup. Once you establish that this potential meetup what is going to happen, that's when you place officers in an omnipresence perspective and you're able to interdict this before it manifests the chaotic scene that we see on the screen.
And Darren, I tweeted over the weekend, where are the parents? Where are the parents?
The parents hold a significant role in this. Ultimately, the social contract needs to be upheld, and you as a parent should be held liable if your kid is out committing to rambunctious behavior and creating a lawless environment such as what we see on this television screen. And it's a problematic narrative because the elected officials can do a lot more, but in many cases, you have elected officials that don't want to present the militaristic approach of police standing on guard in protecting that society. They look to go the other route from the perspective of police and community relationships, and that police and community relationship works well at one point, but it's at a certain point you need to be somewhat more aggressive and more forward in your approach to police.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, fathers have to be present, moms have to be present, whoever's the role model to these kids have to be present. It's mostly young males. Darren, this has to stop. Thank you for your perspective tonight. And coming up, the Pope and the President, or is it the Pope versus the President, or is it the President versus the Pope? What's really at stake here? Seen and Unseen with Raymond Arroyo is next.
Don't sweat the technique.
Thanks for that. We turn to Fox News contributor Raymond Arroyo. All right, Raymond, the media running wild with the story that President Trump and the Pope are engaged in a war of words.
Well, there's a reason for all of this, Laura, which I'm going to get to in a moment. President Trump took to Truth Social last night, writing, Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible on foreign policy. Later that night, he elaborated on his long social media post this way.
Why did you attack Pope Leo on Truth Social?
I don't think he's doing a very good job. He likes crime, I guess. We don't like a Pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a Pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo.
And today, Pope Leo clapped back.
I do not look at my role as being political, politician. I don't want to get into a debate with him. I don't think that the message of the gospel is meant to be abused in the way that some people are doing. And I will continue to speak out loud against war. And I think someone has to stand up and say, there's a better way to do this.
Raymond, what's going on here?
Well, I mean, look, let's start with the president. This was a sloppy and frankly disrespectful attack on the Pope. I don't think he should have issued this kind of long ad hominem. He didn't get any points for doing this. There's nothing good that comes of it. So, you know, he shouldn't have gone down this path. On the Pope's side, the Pope says he's not a politician. That's true. He shouldn't be. But I understand in the president's reading of this, when you have a Pope saying, call your congressman, call your senator to get them to advocate for peace and oppose this war. When the Pope says, as he did on Easter Sunday, let those who have weapons lay them down, Laura, that sounds political, particularly when you've got Swiss guardsmen with arms protecting you.
And a wall.
And I don't remember the Pope saying that about China. So these are personal opinions. I think they're talking past each other. But this thing is way out of control.
Well, he withdrew that post, right? He deleted it, one of the posts that he put out.
No. He withdrew an image you'll see in a moment, but not that post. He hasn't.
Yeah. So you think this has been kind of intentionally kind of created by the media?
Well, yeah, last night on 60 Minutes, Nora O'Donnell featured 3 left-of-center cardinals. You remember Cardinal Supich, who tried to give Dick Durbin, a Catholic lifelong supporter of abortion, a Lifetime Achievement Award recently. Well, these 3 cardinals condemned ICE agents, the Iran war, and the Trump administration. So look, clearly the president was watching this. Nora O'Donnell has now even confirmed. She talked to the president. He was watching. You've heard of rope-a-doping? This is pope-a-doping. Nora O'Donnell seems to have known what she was doing, Laura.
This all kind of started after our 60 Minutes report last night that included criticism not only from the Pope, but also these 3 influential cardinals. It appears that President Trump may have been watching that.
Yeah, well, those were red cardinals there, right? For sure.
Well, here's the big problem with this. this comes on the eve of the midterms. This is clearly, it feels like a political whiff of something moving here. The Pope met with David Axelrod last week, and now you've got these three cardinals who I talked to a number of bishops today. These three cardinals represent absolutely nobody but themselves. Okay, so it feels like they were trying to provoke the president into a reaction, and he fell into the trap. And look, for a sense of how this is shaking out, the president of Iran, Laura, has weighed in, expressing support for Pope Leo and condemning Trump over this AI image generated of the Pope, or the president rather, as a Christ-like figure. The Iranian president said it's a desecration of Jesus, Laura. The image on its face is sacrilegious. I'm glad the president took this down. But, you know, this was much ado about nothing, and it all could have been avoided. Don't react to 60 Minutes and whatever they're portraying there. And the Pope should stick to doctrine and not personal opinion in politics.
You know, it's not the first time I've said this, Raymond, but you don't have to swing at every pitch. There's a lot going on right now, and probably reacting to what Pope Leo is saying. You know, the church has always been, you know, not MAGA on immigration. They want more bodies in the seats. I guess their wall is good in Vatican City, but our wall isn't. You know, they have a big wall.
Yeah, but look, the Pope is always going to come down on the side of peace, Laura. That's what a Pope should do. But when they get into policy prescriptions, that's specific, it's always for trouble. I think broad moral frameworks is what the Pope should be advocating, and he is.
All right, Raymond, thank you for that perspective. Very important tonight. Jesse's next.
It's the Holy Spirit's job to convict, God's job to judge, and our job to love.